second half of this study, when we will be going into the book of Revelation, we will show that all of these troubled and broken nations around the world have to hear the everlasting gospel. But what many of us see taking place all around us, all over the world, and sadly the things most don't see, is the exact detailed description of how Jesus Christ prophetically described the last generation on this earth, and their spiritual condition, and their immoral state and decline, just prior to his glorious second coming. If you're not clued up with the right material, a system can sadly, without you being aware of it, destroy and crush your dreams of your family planning, not through negligence, but by outright deliberate wickedness of a well-orchestrated and monopolized system that continues to practice subtle infanticide with very few people in the know of what is going on. These are the sad lengths fallen man will stoop to. Man will constantly clash in these end times with each other, exploiting the vulnerable where he wants to dominate the weak for his own greedy economic interests, not caring one bit of neither age or gender or who gets hurt, for he is deeply selfish, and corporate interests and their desire for increased profits is ruining many people's lives. But before we get into the meat of prophecy, before we go into a very deep historical and exegetical study and the depth of how to prepare for the new heaven and the new earth, the narrator has to briefly show one of the major obstacles that we will face before you make it into eternity, and we will go into more thorough detail near the end and look at the root cause of the background of the conflict that is currently taking place on this earth.
There may and likely will come a time in which we have both an airborne disease that is deadly. And in order for us to deal with that effectively, we have to put in place an infrastructure, not just here at home, but globally, that allows us to see it quickly, isolate it quickly, respond to it quickly. There may and likely will come a time in which we have both an airborne disease that is deadly. And in order for us to deal with that effectively, we have to put in place an infrastructure, not just here at home, but globally, that allows us to see it quickly, isolate it quickly, respond to it quickly.
Classrooms have robots that analyze students' health and engagement levels. Students wear uniforms with chips that track their locations. There are even surveillance cameras that monitor how often students check their phones or yawn during classes. These gadgets have alarmed Chinese netizens.
Now for more on Israel's decision to allow the security agency Shin Bet to track the movements of people with the virus.
Something as simple as wearing a watch that may soon be able to tell you if you have the flu or COVID-19.
As companies prepare for employees to return to the workplace, businesses are considering different ways of monitoring employees for possible COVID-19 infections. And a new survey by Gartner, that's an IT service management company, found more than half of the employers in the country are making plans to collect temperature data on employees.
In the small town of Westport, Connecticut, a drone is scanning for COVID-19 symptoms.
Vladimir Bikovsky was put under a 2-week quarantine after returning from South Korea.
Камеры установлены на каждом подъезде. Я, честно говоря, думал, что они относятся к системам видеодомофонов для жителей, но оказалось, что они подключены в систему слежения, которая во всей Москве работает.
Что массовое использование технологий распознавания лиц на городских камерах – это тотальная слежка государства за гражданами, и государство это 100% будет использовать только в своих интересах против политических оппонентов или против людей, которые власти не нравятся.
Remember the 5th of November. Those caught in violation of curfew will be prosecuted without leniency or exception.
It's past curfew, you know.
The 8 o'clock curfew, the earliest in South Florida.
20 million French people must be back at home as a new curfew takes effect this weekend.
Sirens blare across the Jordanian capital, warning residents to stay in their homes.
Australia's Victoria has imposed a nightly curfew for the capital, Melbourne.
But the nationwide curfew enforced throughout the territory of the Republic of Kenya is extended for a further 60 days.
This morning, cash in the age of COVID-19. The pandemic appears to be accelerating the rise of digital currency. Here in the U.S., mobile payments have spiked dramatically since the outbreak. In the U.K., the BBC reports ATM withdrawals are down 60%. China's central bank has reportedly been disinfecting banknotes, while many businesses around the world are asking customers not to use cash at all. It's all making some wonder if the digital dollar is the new king of currency.
In the UK, the front page of the October 20th, 2020 Metro newspaper headlined on the left that the death toll soars in the UK, but not from COVID-19. RT News on October the 19th, 2020 said more people die at home from cancer, heart disease and dementia in the UK since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Office for National Statistics, the UK's largest independent producer of official statistics, in July 2020, the second bullet point reads that COVID was the 8th leading cause of death in England and did not even feature in the top 10 leading causes of deaths in Wales. COVID-19 was the 24th most common cause of death in England in August 2020, according to an 18th of September 2020 article in the British Daily Mail newspaper. So why are we in a lockdown if the British government's own official data is clear that COVID is extremely low on the radar for mortality deaths? The world's current population is roughly 7.7 billion and counting. And when leading analysts were monitoring the spread of the virus, they discovered that more than 6 months into the pandemic, the coronavirus has infected more than 11 million people worldwide, out of a population of 7.7 billion. The World Health Organization held a 2-day online meeting of 1,300 scientists from around the world. The agency's chief scientist, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, said the consensus for now was that the IFR, that is the infection fatality ratio, which estimates this proportion of deaths among all infected individuals, is about 0.6%, which means that the risk of death is less than 1%. And highlighted in red, the virus may be less deadly than it has appeared, according to the New York Times, July 4th, 2020. So the low mortality rate virus is being cleverly used for a much wider, very well calculated and orchestrated global program. And what have been some of the very destructive effects of the COVID lockdown around the world?
Some cities in China are reportedly seeing a spike in divorce filings after months of quarantine.
Family lawyers and couples counsellors have reported a huge spike in Victorians separating or seeking a divorce.
Another side effect of COVID-19 on families, all this time together has pushed some marriages over the edge. It's something divorce attorneys have warned about since the shutdowns began.
Modern history has always shown that a recession will always lead to a very high increase in divorces. But very few people are aware of the deep psychological damage and scars it causes on innocent children. When their homes are broken, it destabilizes them and they are greatly affected, and that security they once had is gone. The COVID-19 lockdown has also led to a huge downplayed increase in global depression and suicides of people who are in deep despair. It is not normal for human beings to live in total isolation from one another. We need family and friends. Studies in the UK, though not highly publicized, has shown that there has been an increase in child suicide. They have never lived in a world like this. Similar results are in Japan, with both women and children, a country that already has a recent increase of suicides, and in China, mental health problems have grown by 35%, and suicide attempts have sadly doubled. There's also sadly been an increase in domestic violence, where cowardly men are battering their so-called loved ones to a pulp. Men who fail to deal with their own internalized issues. It's sick, and children are once again the ones who are neglected when an individual is battering their spouse senselessly. Most of us are totally unaware what happens behind closed doors. The narrator would like to ask a few very serious personal questions. Did you ever think that you would live in a world where virtually every ethnic group would be barely identifiable or unrecognizable because of some kind of face covering? The narrator still thinks that people just look very strange and odd. This is his own personal opinion. Did you think that you'll be robbed of your gym time where you can de-stress because of a virus that kills 1% of the world's population? Did you ever think that your own house of worship, your church, would be off limits to you, besides when it is going through a refurbishment? Did you ever think that you would walk past small businesses in your own area and they would be permanently closed? Did you ever think that you would be forced to isolate from loved ones and your only form of communication with family or friends would be in a digital chat room, or getting advice from the doctor was no longer private and personal, but now it is in a virtual space? Crazy. While people are suffering all over the world, being driven into extreme poverty, and even being denied foreign aid by the US-controlled monetary aid system, the Billionaires Club have profited handsomely from the virus, increasing their gazillions, and they have also developed new contracts to make weapons with the government. But there are also more darker things on the horizon. In the UK, many have watched films about British intelligence, both MI5 and MI6, but now some realities are now coming closer to home. Britain's MI5 can now legally murder, kidnap and torture anyone they suspect of being a domestic terrorist. A preparation of things to come. Many have voiced their concern, but it has fallen on deaf ears, and they have officially passed the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Criminal Conduct Bill in October 2020 that gives these agencies the power to reintroduce the Inquisition. The British Army have also been given the power to assist in door-to-door coronavirus testing at a time when its government admits that it double-counted its own coronavirus tests. And the army has also been given new drones that can fly at 50 miles per hour and can also blow open doors with explosives. I hope you are paying attention, not just if you live in the UK, but anywhere, for things are slowly being put into place for a global takeover. But what has led to this state of the earth? What is really going on? What has man from time immemorial, beginning in the days of Nimrod up to this very day, have this deep dark obsession with rebelling and in controlling his fellow man? What has led to this? People all over the world are looking for deep answers and are unclear of what is going on. Where can this global madness be traced? Fathers in New York, the Statue of Liberty. Though America is described as a democratic republic, many think that presidents are not actually elected but selected, and there are influential globalists at conferences in both the Vatican and in the Billionaires Club at the World Economic Forum in January 2018 who can forewarn you who has to be removed if they find them a major stumbling block that is slowing down the program of the wider global world order plans, the Great Reset.
The U.S. is a problem. It became a far more significant problem with Donald Trump. He may or may not be president after November.
Clearly, I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020 or even sooner.
Now, we can spend hours going on and on about the new administration and how its new commander-in-chief is only continuing the work of previous administrations, but that is a waste of time, for the prophecy clearly identifies a system, not an individual. That's a distraction. So let us carefully look at the prophetic text. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 10 talks of the first kingdom, the papacy, that is symbolically described as a beast that goes into captivity by France. Then in the latter part of the 18th century, roughly around the same time, another beast rises in a different geographical territory, also assisted by France. And listen to the language very carefully and the key word highlighted in red in Revelation chapter 13 verses 11 and 12. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, which is the papacy, whose deadly wound was healed. As you can see, there is a consistency in the language, and since those 13 colonies separated from the British Crown, it has embarked on a very brutal territorial expansion program, wiping out not only thousands of innocent lives of the indigenous population of the land that she colonized, but millions outside of her territory also, and her track record is absolutely horrific. She cleverly covers up her multitude of sins with the vehicle she uses to market her American foreign policy to the world, mapped out in detail in her different forms of edutainment via the film and the gaming industry, and she is the perfect candidate to fulfill the prophecy that will eventually by force reintroduce the Inquisition. The rendition program in post 9/11 exposed how nearly all the nation states around the world work with the USA as an ally via the CIA to kidnap innocent individuals and then put them into black sites, prisons and torture camps all over the world, a model of things to come. And Revelation chapter 13 and verse 15 forewarns us that she is going to impose a global death decree on whoever does not follow a specific form of worship. But the following two verses, 16 and 17, details how she will use a global economic weapon on the entire world that will spare neither age, gender, or social status, who does not have either the mark of the beast, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. We may identify what those three things are in another.
Sarah, Amazon has added retired four-star General Keith Alexander to its board of directors. General Alexander also served as director of the NSA from 2005 to 2014. He currently serves as co-CEO of IronNet. That is a cybersecurity tech company that he founded in 2014. Now, this is an interesting move, guys, adding someone to the Amazon board with close ties to the government.
So the biggest company in tech, Amazon, is even more closely aligning itself with the US government and increasing its global influence to have a deeper knowledge of people's spending habits. Little known companies like MITRE are keeping a track of the world through its $2 billion research hub of collecting data on civilians in the digital space. But the US government are also conducting a surveillance operation on religious communities. The app Muslim Pro that alerts Muslims to pray wherever they are in the world, according to Vice, the US Military Special Operations Command has been given secret access to that app where they can monitor both the exact time and the geographical location data of where the 100 million Muslim users are praying all over the world. Their excuse is they are trying to trace extremist terror cells. This is very serious, a shadow of things to come. And in Canada, they are conducting a PSYOPs operation to carefully monitor how civilians panic or how they react in a crisis. It is getting very deep worldwide. Wall Street, known as the financial center of the world, can influence important financial decisions in politics. For they financed and gave Joe Biden $74.4 million and Donald Trump $18.1 million. They clearly helped to decide who won. According to the Financial Times, US banks recently took over the financial world, and with that level of dominance over the financial markets, she is the only power on this earth that can make a global decision where no man cannot buy or cannot sell. and she already does it on a micro level via her Department of the Treasury, where according to its official website it can freeze the economic assets of foreign countries and regimes, terrorists and international narcotic traffickers who pose a threat to the US economic interests. If you want to see a trial run of this, you'll have to see how the lockdown and preparing a vaccine is being used to exploit the vulnerable. Though a public health group has or is suing the US's National Institute of Health for documents on the origins of SARS-CoV-2, though a major study has shown that the lockdown stay-at-home orders does not stop the spread of the coronavirus, though health experts that includes 12,000 scientists and medics worldwide have signed an anti-lockdown petition, though one of the most respectable journals, Lancet, says lockdowns only increases poverty, the Pope condemns anti-lockdown protesters who are clearly rioting in protest of the restrictions that are increasing their poverty, and governments are deliberately ignoring the scientists. In different parts of the world, particularly the United States and Australia, they are threatening people that if they do not take the coronavirus vaccine, they will not get no welfare payments and they will not be able to travel overseas. That's wicked. And schools and employers could ban people who do not take the vaccine. A trial run for no man might buy or sell. Or as they have labeled it, this is all just a fire drill or a training exercise according to the US government. But as this study comes to a close, we will observe one of the final tests that the United States is going to perform that will be very deeply supernatural in nature and will challenge the very fibers of your reality. And the narrator wants to make it very clear that only those who are truly and deeply connected to God through constant prayer and study will be able to resist it. The narrator will provide some of the biblical tools to forewarn you of what's to come. I know it's very, very difficult when you lose a loved one, but when they are dead, they are dead. And if you see something that looks like the very person you just buried in the ground, it is a devil. Job chapter 7 verses 9 and 10 says, "As the cloud is consumed and vanisheth away, so he that goeth down to the grave shall come up no more. He shall return no more to his house, neither shall his place know him any more." Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verses 5 and 6 says, "For the living know for sure that they shall die." So we all know we have to face death one day. But the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished, neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun. In 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 17, we are given a glimpse of spiritual warfare, that it is God who fights on our behalf for his people. And those chariots of fire, according to Psalms chapter 68 and verse 17, are angels. And in this warfare, God definitely has your back. Just before Jesus was crucified, he gave a very serious warning. Not once about deception, not twice about deception, not 3 times about deception, but in Matthew chapter 24, 4 times. Because though he described his second coming as like lightning, Jesus still knew that many false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders and will mesmerize many people by them. But in Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20, a false prophet is mentioned who will perform miracles to mesmerize people in worshipping the first beast, the papacy. And in Revelation chapter 13 verses 13 and 14, when we compare spiritual things with spiritual, this is the exact function of the second beast or kingdom, the United States, who is going to perform a very powerful, enticing, supernatural act that is going to deceive the majority of the inhabitants of the earth. How will she do this? In 2002, the narrator purchased a book titled Harp by Jerry Smith that documented what the US plans to do with holographic imagery. The Washington Post on Monday, February the 1st, 1999 documented that the US planned to use holographic imagery of Allah in Iraq in warfare. but in another document titled Non-Lethal Weapons, Terms and References by Robert J. Bunker. At the bottom you can see it is a document by the US Air Force, and it goes into more detail. In the section titled Holograms, under Death, it reads that a hologram can be used to scare a target individual to death. Example, a drug lord with a weak heart sees the ghost of his dead rival appearing at his bedside and dies of fright. The hologram of a prophet is the projection of the image of an ancient god over an enemy capital whose public communications have been seized and used against it in a massive psychological operation, and imitating the angels in the days of Elisha will be the projection of soldier forces images which make an opponent think more allied forces exist than actually do. Make an opponent believe that allied forces are located in a region where none actually exists, and or provide false targets for his weapons to fire upon. How is the world being trained for that final showdown? Many blacks that are disillusioned with God through a misrepresentation of his character that includes organizations like Black Lives Matter, who are running back to their ancient pagan roots and think that they're being enlightened, and also many whites who are also disillusioned with organized religion and rejecting the gospel, are also going back to their nature religion of Wicca. They are not aware that they are all being set up for the final deception. And through the influx of shows on both HBO and Netflix, they are slowly desensitizing you and conditioning your minds so that you get so used to seeing occult imagery that becomes normalized, and you will no longer have the strength to stand up to it and condemn things you once viewed as abhorrent. So by the time any occult apparitions take place, you are already hooked, brainwashed, and set up to embrace it. But amidst this global pandemonium, there will be a people who will be able to resist this last great deception and stand firm and will not bend or waver. They will not be following the crowd. They will not be controlled by a denominational creed, but by the word of God. And Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12 says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." And we know that according to Romans chapter 5 and verse 3, their patience came through tribulation. For when your foundation is deeply rooted in Christ, Jesus tells us in Luke chapter 6 and verse 48, nothing can shake you. So just as Abraham left Ur of the Chaldees by faith, looking for a new heaven and a new earth, let us follow in his footsteps and claim that free gift that has been promised to us.